Hello. Um, I'm probably only going to do like 20 minutes today. Okay. So where we left off, okay, page 216 at the top, where we left off was, I remember it was really exciting because there was the big lawsuit and it was Macy versus Robert Moses. And I'm trying to remember more of what happened. I'll just start reading and then it'll probably come back to me. Also, before I forget to mention, I ordered some fun mugs on eBay. I thought that could be a fun thing to do. And so I got like one of the original Diana engagement teacups. It was like $20, not as much as I thought it would be. Okay. At the time, Macy had thought that $25,000 would be ample, the legal expenses. But as the commission's lawyers began to pile appeal on top of appeal, he wrote Havemeyer that, to a layman, the ramifications of this litigation are almost beyond belief. And ramifications meant money. If Moses's lawyers were constantly filing new briefs, Macy's had to file briefs in reply. The briefs had to be printed in standard legal form, and they were running into thousands of pages. The printing bill for a single appeal ran to $3,652.63. The stenographic transcript for a single appeal cost $545. And finally, of course, there were the lawyers' fees. Lawyers like Tuttle and the experts required to handle appeals didn't come cheap. The first bill for services rendered was delivered to Macy on April 28, 1925. It was for $10,000. Even before the trial in Dunn's court began, the $25,000 mark had been reached. To Macy, the idealist, the case represented something that was more important than money. Okay, now I'm remembering that Justice Dunn was the judge, which is such a good name. And the other one was like Justice Good or something like that. Like Justice, I'm trying to remember. Both of the justices had really good acronyms. I can't find it. Oh, Justice Strong and Justice Dunn. Okay. To Macy, the idealist, the case represented something that was more important than money. When Havemeyer wrote, "This is my limit," Macy replied that he would carry on alone. Appeals attorneys told him that if he was willing to press the fight vigorously, he would probably win, although the victory might not come until the case had been transferred out of the state courts and into the U.S. Supreme Court, which would focus on the basic constitutionality of the use by a state agency of one individual's money to seize the property of another. Macy authorized them to proceed, but Moses's attorneys continued to make motions and file briefs. And when Macy's appeal from Dunn's decision finally reached the appellate division, I've gotten better at pronouncing appellate. Wait, you're handing in your dissertation tonight? In what? Okay, I might be mixing things up, but I feel like you're British and you're studying like city planning related stuff, but I might be remembering wrong. Congratulations. Math and okay. So I'm totally wrong. Wow, congratulations. I'm probably going to do a short one today, so you can keep working on your dissertation. Do you go to, I forgot where you go as well. I feel like it was Cambridge or Oxford, or maybe I'm just thinking of those because those are the first British universities that come to mind. By April 1928, his attorneys were dunning him for payment of a $1,100 bill. Although the case would eventually be brought before the Court of Appeals, which upheld Dunn's decision, and an attempt was made to bring it to the U.S. Supreme Court, Justice Louis Brandeis brought the legal fight to an end on January 21, 1929, 4 years after the Biltmore hearing, by refusing to issue a writ of certiorari, which would have enabled the court to hear the case. It was obviously not pressed vigorously in these last stages, as though the case were really over already. And in fact, it was. Moses had never stopped developing the Taylor estate, as if its acquisition were a fait accompli. By the spring of 1927, he had laid concrete for access roads and parking fields, set out scores of stone fireplaces and picnic tables, erected wooden bathhouses with showers and lockers, and finished renovating the mansion and outbuildings at a total cost of hundreds of thousands of dollars. During the summer of 1927, it had hundreds of thousands of visitors. By the time the higher courts came to rule on the question of whether the Taylor estate was a park, it was a park. What was the judge to do? Tell the state to tear up the roads and tear down the buildings, to destroy what hundreds of thousands of dollars of the public's money had been spent to build? Tell the people who had visited the Taylor estate that they could visit it no more? In theory, of course, judges should not be influenced by such considerations, but judges are human, and their susceptibility to such considerations was undoubtedly increased by Moses' willingness to attack publicly those of them who ruled against him, as he had done to the local judge, thereby letting the public know exactly who it was who was closing the park to them. Okay, that is so dirty that he just developed the whole thing. Well, congratulations on your dissertation almost being done. What degree is it? Is it like a PhD dissertation? Also, how long is it? The final hearing before the State Court of Appeals was the 25th separate appellate proceeding in the Taylor estate case. The case was, the Herald Tribune said, a landmark in eminent domain. It was also a landmark in the lifescapes of two men. W. Kingsland Macy, who had possessed before it a vague desire to enter politics, had been precipitated by it into the political arena, and had found he enjoyed fighting there. And Macy had learned in his first bout many tricks. After fighting Robert Moses, he was to say, fighting anyone was easy. Becoming active in 1927 in the Suffolk County Republican Organization, within a year, he threw out its leader and seized his place. When the Depression loosened for a moment the Barons' stronghold on the state's GOP organization, Macy tore it from their grasp, and by 1932 was Republican state chairman. Although the GOP's old guard later reformed and ousted him from the chairmanship, he was to rule Suffolk County unchallenged for more than 30 years. When there came a time when it would be useful for him to be in the state senate, he sent himself to the state senate. When he wanted to go to Congress, he sent himself to Congress. Macy's views were liberal, and he introduced progressive governmental innovations in Suffolk County. But to achieve his aims, he ruled the county as an old-time political satrapy, S-A-T-R-A-P-Y. I have no idea what satrapy means, but I'm looking it up. It means a province governed by a satrap, which is a governor of the provinces of the ancient Median and Achaemenid empires, and in several of their successors. Okay, I think that requires a lot of context to understand what that means, and I don't know. Yeah, satrapy was a state in the Iranian Empire. All right, well, let's see. And I totally lost my place. To achieve his aims, he ruled the county as an old-time political satrapy. Ruthless and cunning, he seemed to know every trick of bending men to his will, and he bent them so successfully that Kingsland Macy was called the Little King of Suffolk County. And when, after Macy had fought his way to power, Robert Moses, needing his help, made overtures of friendship, Macy accepted them. Although the strength of their personalities often made them clash, the two one-time amateurs in politics were for more than 30 years the closest of political allies so close, in fact, that when in 1962 cancer ravaged King Macy knew he was about to die, Moses was the only person outside of his immediate family whom he wanted to see. And they just fought in court for 4 years. Enemies to lovers arc. Robert Moses had also learned from the Taylor estate fight his first use of power, lessons that would govern his behavior for the rest of his life. Once hammered home in his consciousness by the results of his accommodation with G. Wilbur Doty, was that the simplest method of accomplishing his aims was to use the power he possessed in all its manifestations, even those that, as recently as a year previously, he had shrunk from using. So thoroughly did he embrace this lesson and the creature of the machine that was its embodiment, that when, in 1927, a vacancy occurred on the Long Island Park Commission, he had Smith appoint McWhinney to it. I don't know who McWhinney is. The simplicity, combined with the feeling of accomplishment, might well have made Moses ask himself if it really made any difference whether he worked with Tom McWhinney. What difference did it make if the state purchased the right-of-way for the Meadowbrook Causeway from a bunch of farmers or from a bunch of Republican insiders? What difference did it make if he gave a road building contract to Uncle Andy Weston? Okay, I remember Uncle Andy Weston. Uncle Andy was one of the Long Island guys. I guess that's clear from the context, though. What difference did it make to the public, and what difference did it make to him? What did he care if Doty's friends made money from his dreams? If they did, he had learned, the dream would become reality. And if they did not, he learned, it wouldn't. And the dream was the important thing. The dream was what mattered. This lesson, Robert Moses translated into phrases that began to appear in his letters and, according to his associates, his conversation after the Taylor estate fight. Quote, "The important thing is to get things done." And then next quote, "You can't make an omelet without breaking eggs." Next quote, "If the end doesn't justify the means, what does?" Another lesson Moses learned was that, in the eyes of the public, the end, if not justifying the means, at least made them unimportant. Al Smith had succeeded in blurring the public's mind the legal technicalities of the fight by focusing the public's mind on the other end of the fight. Parks. The value of parks as an issue was another lesson. As long as you were fighting for parks, you could hardly help being a hero. When the Taylor fight started, he himself had been all but unknown. During the fight, he had been portrayed in 100 front-page stories and 100 editorials as a hero, as a man acting in the interest of the people at large and of all future generations. This lesson, Robert Moses would often recite to associates. He would put it this way: as long as you're fighting for parks, you can be sure of having public opinion on your side. And as long as you have public opinion on your side, you're safe. As long as you're on the side of parks, you're on the side of angels. You can't lose. There were other lessons too. Whatever the motivation that had impelled him to take the risk of starting to transform the Taylor estate into a park while the courts had still seemed likely to rule that it was not a park, a fearless determination to do what he knew was right, regardless of the consequences, a blind faith in Smith's ability to rescue him from consequences, a desperation to see at last the beginning of the realization of at least one of his dreams, or perhaps an insight, the insight of a political genius, that physical development would help rather than hurt his cause. The risk had been magnificently justified. And he had understood the significance of that justification. Once you did something physically, it was very hard for even a judge to undo it. If judges who had to submit themselves to the decision of the electorate only infrequently were thus hogtied by the physical beginning of a project, how much more so would be public officials who had to stand for re-election year by year? If he had needed a gift from August Heckscher to make victory certain, what did that prove? Only that once you physically began a project, there would always be some way found of obtaining the money to complete it. Once you sink that first stake, he would often say, they'll never make you pull it up. This is a good thing. Things are heating up. These lessons had other implications. If ends justified means, and if the important thing in building a project was to get it started, then any means that got it started were justified. Furnishing misleading information about it was justified. So was underestimating its costs. Misleading and underestimating, in fact, might be the only way to get a project started. Since his projects were unprecedentedly vast, one of the biggest difficulties in getting them started was the fear of public officials, not only upstate conservatives, but liberal public officials as well, concerned with the overall functioning of the state, that the state couldn't afford the projects, that the projects, beneficial though they may be, would drain off a share of the state's wealth incommensurate with their benefits. But what if you didn't tell the officials how much the projects would cost? What if you let the legislators know about only a fraction of what you knew would be the project's ultimate expense? Once they had authorized that small initial expenditure and you had spent it, they would not be able to avoid giving you the rest when you asked for it. How could they? If they refused to give you the rest of the money, what they had given you would be wasted, and that would make them look bad in the eyes of the public. And if they said you had misled them, well, they were not supposed to be misled. If they had been misled, that would mean that they hadn't investigated the projects thoroughly and had therefore been derelict in their own duty. The possibilities for a polite but effective form of political blackmail were endless. Once a legislature gave you money to start a project, it would be virtually forced to give you the money to finish it. The stakes you drove should be thin-pointed, wedge-shaped, in fact, on the end. Once you got the end of the wedge for a project into the public treasury, it would be easy to hammer in the rest. Another lesson Moses learned from his first use of power was the latitude given him by its possession. In the Taylor estate fight, Moses had broken the law. On this point, there had been no judicial disagreement. No court had ruled that his first appropriation of the estate was legal. Every court that had ruled on it had ruled it illegal. But what had happened to him as a result? Had he been fined 6 cents? 2 cents, actually, if he wanted to insist that the other 2 Long Island Park commissioners paid their share of the fine. This chapter is really good. Also, hello, you caught a good chapter. We're talking about Moses's first lessons learned from power, and the first use of power was when he illegally took a big estate on Long Island to turn it into a park, and all the courts were like, this is illegal, and then this one guy fought him in court for years, but ultimately he got away with it. And then the guy he was fighting for 4 years became his political ally for the rest of his life. I know, we're only on page 219, so we have like almost 1,000 to go. Okay, so part of the reason was the Heckscher gift, of course, but a more basic one was that power, specifically the power that came with the money he could dispose of as a state official, insulated him from the law's retribution. He had been able to employ lawyers numerous enough and clever enough to utilize the technicalities of the law to frustrate the intent of the law, to throw enough sand into the machinery of justice to slow its gears sufficiently so that they could not mesh and produce the conclusion which its spirit demanded. Even an opponent as determined as W. Kingsland Macy, and as well equipped with money as Macy was, had had to abandon his search for ultimate justice. Justice delayed, the Taylor estate case proved, was truly justice denied. And Moses must have realized, for he demonstrated the realization in subsequent actions, as long as he had political power, as long as he was representing the state, he would have the means of employing as many lawyers as he needed, of delaying and thereby denying justice to his opponents, of shielding himself from its punishments. If there was one law for the poor, who have neither money nor influence, and another law for the rich who have both, there is still a third law for the public official with real power who has more of both. After the Taylor estate fight, Robert Moses must have known, he proved it by his actions, that he could, with far more impunity than any private citizen, defy the law. He gloried in the knowledge, he boasted and bragged about it. For the rest of his life, when a friend, an enemy, or one of his lawyers would protest that something he was doing or proposing to do was illegal, Moses would throw back his head and say with a broad grin, a touch of exaggeration, and much more than a touch of bravado, Nothing I have ever done has been tinged with legality. There was one more lesson. It was one he had started learning years before, and now it had finally sunk in. Would dreams of real size and significance and scope, the accomplishment his mother had taught him was so important, ever be realized by the methods of the men in whose ranks he had once marched, the reformers and idealists? He asked the question of himself, and he answered it himself. No. The method he had adopted to turn his Long Island dream into reality was the way to accomplish something. It was the way to get things done. It was, he concluded, the only way. I know, at this point, he's like, cool. Unfortunately, things are going to get worse. Also, oh, look, Pearl is listening in. That felt like it was the end of the chapter, but it's not. We're still in a chapter for the next, for 6 more pages. And the next chapter is going to be called Driving. That's exciting. $1 million was the amount available to Long Island out of the $15 million. The $15 million of park spending. He had told the legislature that $1 million would be the cost of the Long Island program. He knew that actually the $1 million would pay for only a small fraction of the program. But he had learned how to get things done. With the $1 million, he drove a lot of stakes. Instead of spending the $1 million to complete a few parks, he spent it to acquire the land for many. For Montauk Point State Park and Hither Hill State Park and Wildwood State Park and Sunken Meadow State Park and Belmont Lake State Park and Hempstead Lake State Park and Valley Stream State Park, and to at least begin development of all of them, as well as the Fire Island State Park and Jones Beach State Park he had previously acquired. By the end of 1926, the beaches of Long Island, once reserved for the rich, were dotted with wooden bathhouses open to all. Families who weren't interested in ocean swimming had to travel along Merrick Road, only 2 miles beyond the city line, before they came to the Valley Stream Park's wooded 97 acres and calm blue lake, and in the woods, hiking trails, picnic tables, and fireplaces. And on the lake floats, diving boards, sliding ponds, and rowboats were awaiting their use. By the end of 1926, moreover, the road was begun that would free city drivers from the tyranny of Merrick Road. By the time surveying of the route for the Southern State Parkway was complete, it was August. Department of Public Works engineers protested that it was too close to the cold, damp Long Island winter to begin construction, but there was plenty of time to drive stakes. To show the public quickly how beautiful his parkways would be, he decided that the first segment would be the 2.78-mile loop around the huge reservoir in Hempstead Lake State Park, the prettiest portion of the whole route. On August 28, 1926, with only a handful of engineers and an uninterested construction gang as an audience, Robert Moses dug a spade into the soil near the reservoir and jerked it out. The earth that came up with it was the first ever turned for a Robert Moses road. His talk with Francis Perkins about the highway below Riverside Drive had taken place in 1914, a full 12 years before. He had been planning roads ever since. As he stood there, still holding the shovel, a foreman gave a signal and laborers began to shovel dirt into the small spoke-wheeled dump trucks that, in the 1920s, served as earth-moving machines. Robert Moses stepped back and watched the work begin. Exciting! I liked the callback to when he was in his 20s working as a reformer, and he went on a walk with that lady and revealed that he had massive plans for roads, and she was like, oh, weird, random. Okay. Hutchinson and Hewitt, and basically all we know about them that matters is that they're Long Island Republican guys who usually don't like Robert Moses. Hutchinson and Hewitt were amazed and angry over Moses's progress in 1926. Counting the Department of Public Works and Conservation Department funds he had used, he had already spent on Long Island parks far more than the $1 million that he was supposed to pay for the whole Long Island Park and Parkway system. And now he submitted park improvement requests that totaled $1 million more. And who knew what innocent appearing items in 1927 Department of Public Works and Conservation Department budget requests concealed additional funds Smith was planning to make available to Moses. A wholly disproportionate share of the state budget was being spent on Long Island. In a private confrontation with Smith and Moses, oh wait, now I'm remembering. Hutchinson and Hewitt are like state guys. I think they might be from upstate where no one cares about New York City. Okay. In a private confrontation with Smith and Moses, they said that Moses' plans were too grandiose. Their cost was beyond the ability of the state to pay, they said, and parks were simply not needed on the scale he proposed. The conflict came to a head over Jones Beach. In 1926, public bathing beaches in America fell into one of two classifications: ill-equipped huddles of shabby, unpainted wooden bathhouses that contained nothing but toilets, showers, and lockers, or boardwalk beaches such as Coney Island and Atlantic City, which had surrendered the beauty of their seascapes to roller coasters, weight-guessing games, blaring fun houses, bawling barkers, and other carnival concessions. But Robert Moses wasn't thinking of unpainted wood or carnivals. One day, he invited to Jones Beach Gilmore Clark, landscape architect of the Bronx River Parkway; Harvey W. Corvette, the architect responsible for the design of some of the Long Island Baron's most beautiful manor houses; several other famous architects, landscape architects, and engineers, and a handful of young commissioned staffers with whose work he had been impressed. As the little group of men stood on the vast, empty expanse of sand, Moses began pointing. One bathhouse would be over there, he said, and the other over there. But then they would be almost a mile apart, the men with him pointed out. Yes, he said, and they should understand at once that he wasn't talking about ordinary bathhouses. These were going to contain 10,000 lockers apiece. In addition to bathrooms and shower rooms, they were going to contain wading pools, diving pools, and swimming pools. And the swimming pools were going to be large enough to accommodate hundreds of bathers at a time. There were going to be canopied terraces above the pools so people could sit in the shade and watch the swimmers. And there were going to be other terraces on which people could dine at tables set beneath gaily colored umbrellas. The bathhouses were going to contain solaria. They were going to contain restaurants in every price range. Although they were at a bathing beach, they were going to be constructed not of wood, but of stone and brick, and the stone of brick were going to be of the finest quality. They were going to be surrounded by landscaped lawns, hedges, and flower beds. And he wanted the bathhouses designed with as much care as the finest public buildings in America. With this difference, most public buildings in America were too heavy and stodgy, designed only to impress and awe. The bathhouses would have to be quite large, of course, but they were buildings for people to have a good time in. The architect must encourage people to have fun. It must be airy and light, pleasant. There must be 1,000 little torches to make people feel happy and relaxed. And he didn't want the bathhouses to spoil the panorama. Let them be designed to complement it, not dominate it. The panorama was long, low lines of sand and dunes and the sweep of the ocean. Let the lines of the bathhouses be long, low, and sweeping, he said, horizontal rather than vertical. One other thing, he said, the bathhouses were going to have at least one innovation never included in any public or private building in America. Do you have any predictions for what this is? Diaper changing rooms. He had designed them himself, he said. They would be divided into cubicles, and each cubicle would contain only a diaper disposal basket, a wash basin, a mirror, and a shelf for a mother to lay her baby on. And the shelf shouldn't be table height, he said. He had watched mothers changing diapers, and higher shelves would make it easier. Frances Perkins would have smiled. And she is the lady that worked with him when he was a reformer in Manhattan. Oh, and I remember he had that idea. He told that idea to her like 12 years before. Yanking an envelope from his pocket, Moses began to sketch on its back 2 X's to represent the bathhouses, lines to show how they would be connected on the beach side by a wide boardwalk, on the bay side by an ocean parkway. Midway between the 2 X's, where the causeway from the mainland would join the parkway, he drew a large circle between 2 squares. The causeway would end in a circle, he said. People who didn't want to use the bathhouses could drive around it and into the squares, parking lots, each large enough to hold 10,000 cars, and then walk with their families to the beach through the underpasses under the parkway. Or they could drive around the circle, stop on the beach side, drop their families off first, and then park in the lots and walk back to the beach to join them. Or if they didn't want to go to the beach at all, they could simply keep driving on the parkway east or west. The families that got out at the circle would would walk to the beach along a broad mall that ended at the boardwalk. And along the boardwalk would be open-air cafes serving inexpensive meals and a restaurant with cuisine, atmosphere, and service equal to the finest in America. And stretching off to either side would be outdoor games, pitch and putt golf, table and paddle tennis, shuffleboard, roller skating rinks, baseball fields set in little stadia. Wow, I didn't know that the plural of stadium was stadia. I'm circling that. That's kind of fun. For the evenings, there would be bandstands and dancing under the stars. He sketched in restaurants, parking lots, playing fields, and bandstands until there was no more room on the envelope. One of the famous architects standing around Moses said, "Are you crazy?" The others knew what the architect meant. As one was later to put it, it was the scale of the thing. Nothing on a scale like this had ever been done in public recreation in America. Here we were on an absolutely deserted sandbar. There was no way even to get there but by boat. And here was this guy drawing X's on the back of an envelope and talking about bathhouses like palaces and parking lots that held 10,000 cars. Why, I don't think there was a parking lot for 10,000 cars anywhere in America. And landscaping on a sandbar. We weren't even sure anything would grow on a sandbar. We thought he was nuts. The men gathered around Moses. Actually, I think I'm going to end there so that I have something exciting to start on tomorrow. Okay. Page 223 in the middle is where I'm ending. And so I'm getting close to the next chapter, which is driving, which is going to be exciting because he's so famous for roads. Yeah, thanks for joining. This was a fun chapter. Honestly, I got a little sick of all the legal stuff. Like, I think I just don't know enough about the law and courts to appreciate the details. And so it was a lot. But it seems like that's sort of done, or at least that lawsuit is done. So I'm excited. Yeah, she does. She loves sitting on that speaker. It's really cute. Oh, and the wall. Pearl saying goodbye to the people. Oh, she's not really looking. Oh well. Bye.